Kanzaki Miwa is a housewife who keeps the house exceptionally clean and takes great care of her husband. When her husband, Kanzaki Hiroki, brings his subordinates home for a meal, she accidentally calls one by the wrong name. After the guests leave, Hiroki criticizes her as foolish for making such a basic mistake. Miwa sincerely apologizes, promising to be more careful next time. Concerned about disturbing the neighbors due to the late hour, she suggests having earlier gatherings. However, Hiroki opposes, suspecting she finds it bothersome to host his colleagues. During a busy moment, Miwa accidentally breaks a glass. Hiroki, unconcerned about whether she is hurt, scolds her again for not remembering the subordinate's name. Miwa smiles, assuring him she remembers now. Envious of a friend who has a son, Miwa too wishes for a child and plans to discuss this with Hiroki. But he comes home drunk, and she, seeing him tired, suggests he rest first. In his eyes, even her breathing seems wrong. He shouts at her, and the next day asks what she wanted to say. When she reveals her desire for a child, Hiroki impatiently complains about her wasting his time. Miwa is set to attend her friend's shop opening when Hiroki calls, asking her to deliver a document from home to his office. Explaining she's already on her way to her friend, Hiroki rebukes her for not prioritizing correctly. She returns home, changes into more formal attire due to the revealing nature of her outfit, and heads to his office. There, the subordinate from the dinner greets her. Hiroki arrives, telling her he's had the document reprinted and criticizes her for waiting there. Feeling oppressed by Hiroki's constant scolding, Miwa visits a library she frequented as a student to clear her mind. She unexpectedly meets her first love, Fuyutsuki Ryu, a junior from her school days. They still share much in common and chat until the library closes. Ryu, about to leave for a volunteer project in Africa, is glad to have seen her before departing. Hiroki, returning home to find dinner not ready, scolds her again. Unable to bear this life, Miwa firmly states her desire for a child, warning that she cannot continue the marriage otherwise. Enraged, Hiroki reminds her that he covers her mother's hospital bills and debts, allowing her a work-free life. Yet she complains. He believes she only wants a child because she is idle. Unable to argue, Miwa reflects on how she became a housewife at Hiroki's insistence, never anticipating his criticism. Feeling depressed, Kanzaki Miwa visits the library again and runs into Fuyutsuki Ryu. He asks for her help with a company flea market event, requesting that she make some crafts to sell. At home, Kanzaki Hiroki sees a flyer for the flea market and asks Miwa if she plans to attend. Unable to tell the truth, she denies it. On the day of the event, Miwa attends on time and gives Ryu a handmade bookmark. Hiroki secretly visits the flea market and sees Miwa happily interacting with children. He leaves without approaching her. As they part, Ryu expresses feelings he had held back, admitting that Miwa is his first love. Miwa, mindful of her married status, does not respond. At home, Hiroki is troubled by Miwa's radiant smile during the day. That night, he disregards her struggle and forces himself on her. Feeling disrespected, Miwa wanders the streets and ends up at the library again, where she sees Hiroki trying to break in to retrieve something. He asks her to help find a bookmark, which turns out to be the one she gave him during their school days. Each interaction with Ryu makes Miwa long for her vibrant self and yearn to escape her cage. Ryu tells her she has lost her treasure and should seek to reclaim it. She asks for his help, and they spend the night together. Ryu gives her one of two bookmarks, symbolizing his presence with her, and asks her to wait for him until he can return from Africa. Later, Miwa finds out she is pregnant. To determine the father, she undergoes prenatal paternity testing and learns the child is Ryu's. However, she is devastated by news of an explosion in Africa that killed Ryu among others. Heartbroken yet determined, Miwa decides to have the baby. She informs Hiroki of her pregnancy, which does not alter their relationship. He remains indifferent. One day, her friend needs help and leaves her child with Miwa. Before departing, the friend sees Hiroki downstairs, clutching his chest and struggling to breathe. Hiroki has been tense for a long time and even considers seeing a psychologist. At work, Hiroki's project is a success, and he receives congratulations, but his subordinate is criticized for delays. Hiroki pleads on the subordinate's behalf and is scolded. Attempting to regroup, he overhears the defended subordinate calling him foolish and accusing him of pretending to be nice to avoid workplace injustice. Hiroki grows increasingly fearful of the insincerity in his professional environment. Feeling down, Kanzaki Hiroki visits a client. The coffee shop owner notices his pale face and invites him in for a coffee, reassuring him that it's okay to take a break from work. Hiroki opens up to the stranger, admitting he gets mistreated at work and takes it out on his wife at home. He knows Miwa is struggling but can't control himself. He fears he might harm a child if they had one, which makes him resist the idea of parenthood. The owner, seeing Hiroki's love for his wife, advises him to decide whether to leave or be a good father. Leaving the cafe, Hiroki pulls out a handkerchief Miwa gave him years ago, when he was nervous and sweating. He has treasured it ever since. Meanwhile, unable to endure Hiroki's indifference, signs divorce papers intending to raise the child alone. Just as she's about to tell Hiroki, she receives a call from the hospital about her mother's critical condition. They rush to the hospital, and fortunately, her mother survives the emergency. While paying the hospital bills, Miwa sees the huge amount and realizes she can't afford to raise the child on her own. She burns the paternity test and divorce papers at home, deciding to compromise with reality. When Hiroki returns, he asks what she wanted to say the day before. Before Miwa can respond, Hiroki states that he will provide financially for the child, but won't be involved otherwise. Miwa agrees to take full responsibility for the child, filling in Hiroki's name as the father in the maternity booklet, and placing Ryu's bookmark inside. Still unable to get over his departure, unexpectedly, Ryu did not die. He and a colleague were injured and comatose, mistaken by the doctors after a mix-up of their IDs. The female colleague, who liked Ryu, lied that he was the one who died, knowing he wanted to return to Japan for someone important. Months later, Miwa gives birth to a daughter. Hiroki, who said he wouldn't care, rushes in to hold the baby, crying uncontrollably. Miwa can't interpret the meaning behind his tears. Surprisingly, on the day of discharge, Hiroki shows up at the hospital to pick them up and has prepared baby supplies at home. Worried that the baby might affect Hiroki, Miwa asserts she will raise the child alone without causing him trouble. However, she asks Hiroki to name their daughter, explaining that her own name, given by her father despite her parents' divorce, has been a lifelong gift. She hopes Hiroki can give their daughter a meaningful name too. Raising a child alone while cooking and doing housework keeps Kanzaki Miwa very busy. Thankfully, her friend often comes over to help. Last time, her friend saw Kanzaki Hiroki gasping for breath downstairs, looking unwell. She told Miwa to keep an eye on Hiroki's health. Late at night, Hiroki secretly enters Miwa's room to see his daughter and takes the baby bottle from Miwa. He notices a bookmark in the maternity booklet and studies it for a while before going online to research the meanings of names. Miwa wakes up and asks Hiroki if he's overworked and tired, advising him to take care of his health. The next day, Hiroki presents carefully chosen names with detailed meanings. He likes the name Kan, inspired by the bookmark, which he finds beautiful. Besides its bookmark meaning, Kan also implies a guidepost, expressing his hope that their daughter never loses her way in life. Miwa feels uneasy as the bookmark was a token of affection from her and Fuyutsuki Ryu, but she quickly regains composure and agrees to the name. Miwa plans to visit a temple with Hiroki's parents for blessings and knows her mother would like to join but cannot manage alone due to needing a wheelchair. Unexpectedly, Hiroki, who had said he would be working, arrives pushing her mother in a wheelchair. Seeing her mother hold her granddaughter with joy, Miwa is filled with gratitude towards Hiroki, and she's surprised to see him smile. Her mother comments that Miwa married a good man, deeply thanking Hiroki. Miwa feels uneasy hearing this as Hiroki's kindness increases her guilt. That night, Hiroki helps Miwa soothe their daughter to sleep, and they find a long-missed closeness. Miwa feels uneasy, touched by how much Hiroki has changed. Hiroki apologizes for often taking out his work frustrations on her, admitting he has been terrible at handling stress. Holding his daughter for the first time, he felt warmth and uncontrollable tears, wanting to remember that moment forever. Seeing his daughter as his guidepost, Hiroki wants to retract his earlier decision not to be involved with his daughter, aspiring to be a good father. Miwa tells him he is her father. Hiroki takes her hand, his eyes welling up with tears. A new day dawns, and Hiroki, rejuvenated, sets his daughter's photo as his phone's wallpaper, and looks invigorated, filled with hope for life. He even resigns from his role as the head of a new project to spend more time with his daughter. By chance, Miwa sees the handkerchief she gave Hiroki when they first met. Surprised that he has kept it all these years, she realizes Hiroki has always loved her. The birth of their daughter brings a transformative change in their relationship. Just as the family of 3 was beginning to improve their lives, Fuyutsuki Ryu suddenly returned from Africa. He and a female colleague visited the brother of a deceased colleague who initially thought his own brother had survived. However, it was Ryu who had survived, turning the brother's hope into pain. The brother was cold towards Ryu, unable to let go of the mistake in identifying the deceased. The female colleague blamed herself, believing it was her fault, while Ryu, unaware that it was intentional, thought it was just a mix-up during the chaos. Regardless, he felt it was his duty to take care of his colleague's brother. Meanwhile, Hiroki and Miwa took their child for a checkup. Afterwards, Miwa went to the library and placed the bookmark Ryu had left her into a book, symbolically burying her brief romance with him and deciding to keep her memories of Ryu deep within her heart. As she was about to leave, she unexpectedly saw Ryu. He embraced her excitedly, thrilled to be back from the dead. Miwa, overwhelmed, pushed Ryu away and ran out. Hiroki, holding their child, found Miwa looking unwell and asked if she felt all right. Miwa made an excuse to cover up her emotions. That night, Miwa searched online and learned that the list of those killed in the explosion had been corrected. Ryu was confirmed as a survivor. Hiroki, noticing her unease, made her favorite tea. However, the kinder Hiroki was, the more tormented Miwa felt. Ryu found Miwa's contact and tried to arrange a meeting, but Miwa neither returned his messages nor answered his calls. The jealous female colleague urged Ryu to focus on work to fulfill the dreams he shared with the deceased colleague. Over the next few days, Miwa was visibly distressed. Hiroki told her to speak up if something was bothering her, offering to take leave to care for the home, because she and the child were very important to him. Hiroki consulted the coffee shop owner about Miwa's symptoms, who suggested she might have postpartum depression and that getting out might help. Hiroki then asked Miwa's friend to spend time with her. The friend agreed to go shopping with Miwa on Saturday. Ryu messaged Miwa again, saying he would wait for her at their old spot, hoping for a chance to clarify their relationship. Miwa reminded herself that she was a mother now and couldn't act impulsively, ultimately deciding not to meet him. The female colleague came to discuss business and was received by Hiroki. That night, Miwa heard noises from the kitchen and found Hiroki preparing breakfast for the next day, wanting her to sleep in. He was embarrassed about his rusty cooking skills, which caused the noise. Miwa remembered the early days of their marriage when Hiroki would also prepare her favorite dinner if he got off work early. Understanding she was too tired, they were so sweet back then. Hiroki openly expressed his desire to cherish the present, thankful for their daughter's arrival, which had brought smiles back into their lives. He sincerely loved Miwa and their daughter. Listening to her husband's heartfelt words, Miwa was moved to tears. On Saturday, Kanzaki Hiroki took care of their child, allowing Kanzaki Miwa to go shopping with her friend. Miwa visited her friend's shop and confided in her about a lost treasure that had unexpectedly reappeared, even though she now had a new treasure. Her friend felt that while the new treasure was valuable, the old one was also meaningful and should be let go with gratitude. If the old treasure troubled Miwa, her friend offered to take it off her hands. While they were talking, Fuyutsuki Ryu suddenly entered to discuss a business collaboration. Miwa avoided making eye contact with Ryu until he left. Her friend, thinking Miwa was worried about her child, suggested she go home and they could meet another day. Miwa immediately contacted Ryu outside, revealing that after his departure, she had given birth, and her husband's attitude towards her had improved. She wanted to cherish her current family life. Ryu, heartbroken but wishing for Miwa's happiness, agreed to let go. Before parting, Ryu gave Miwa a final hug, which her friend witnessed, misunderstanding it as a possible affair. Later, the friend visited Miwa's home and saw Hiroki actively helping with the child, noting the couple's harmony. Feeling unsettled and jealous of what Miwa had, the friend's child fell asleep, and Miwa suggested Hiroki drive her friend home. During the ride, the friend asked Hiroki if he felt happy, to which he sincerely expressed his contentment and appreciation for his wife and daughter, intensifying the friend's envy. To probe further into Miwa's relationship with Ryu, the friend visited Miwa again, asking what she had wanted to discuss previously. She offered to be a listener, encouraging Miwa to share anything. Miwa, having decided not to dwell on her past with Ryu, lied that her earlier concerns were about not being able to work. Not satisfied, the friend invited Miwa to work in her shop, bringing her child along, unaware of her friend's ulterior motives. Grateful, Miwa appreciated the offer. The next day, Ryu and his colleague met with Hiroki to discuss a collaboration. Hiroki recalled the flea market where his wife had sold embroidered products. Ryu was surprised, realizing that Hiroki was Miwa's husband, and decided to keep his distance to avoid trouble. However, the friend soon began scheming. Shortly after Miwa started working, she arranged for Ryu to visit the shop to discuss a collaboration, intentionally making Miwa and Ryu meet. Miwa tried her best to hide her discomfort. On Saturday, when the friend picked up Kanzaki Miwa's daughter and pretended to admire how adorable she was, she brought the child in front of Fuyutsuki Ryu. Miwa panicked, shouting, "No!" and quickly took her daughter back into her arms. The friend noticed Miwa's unusual behavior and pressed her on why she was so nervous. Miwa lied that her daughter was shy and would cry if held by strangers, but the friend was already suspicious. The friend decided to confront the situation by inviting Kanzaki Hiroki out alone and confessed her long-held feelings for him. She had intended to keep her feelings to herself, but she could not stand Miwa having an affair and potentially having a child with another man. Shocked, Hiroki had a paternity test done, which confirmed that he was not the biological father of the daughter, leaving him heartbroken. At the daughter's half-birthday celebration, Hiroki pretended to be fine and recorded a video of Miwa and their daughter. However, he couldn't hold back his tears and broke down crying. The next morning, Miwa woke to find both Hiroki and the daughter missing. She had a bad feeling as she couldn't find them anywhere. Meanwhile, Hiroki, unable to accept that the daughter he loved was not his own, took her to the beach. Overwhelmed with emotion, he walked into the water with her, hoping they could be father and daughter in another life. Miwa couldn't reach Hiroki's phone and went to places he usually took their daughter for walks but didn't find them. Just then, the friend called, asking why Miwa hadn't come to work. Miwa explained that Hiroki was missing, and she was searching for him. The friend rushed over, confronting Miwa about the child's paternity. She had seen Miwa and Ryu embracing, and had already told Hiroki about Miwa's suspected affair and the dubious paternity of the daughter. The friend complained to Hiroki, accusing Miwa and Ryu of deceiving him, which was intolerable. Miwa explained that Ryu knew nothing. It was all her decision. This made the friend believe Miwa was protecting her affair partner. She told Miwa that if anything happened to Hiroki and the child, Miwa would be to blame. The friend went to a coffee shop Hiroki frequented to look for him. The owner cautioned her against getting too involved in the couple's affairs and to maintain a sense of proportion even if seeking justice, leaving her embarrassed and angry. Frantically searching, Miwa found notes Hiroki had made in parenting books and a folded paper at the bottom of a box, a paternity test report. Realizing Hiroki knew everything, she knelt down, praying for their safe return, willing to accept any punishment. At the same time, Ryu went to the company to discuss a collaboration, but found that Hiroki hadn't come to work. He encountered the friend on the street, who blamed Miwa for being harmed by him. Confused and concerned about Miwa's situation, Ryu felt increasingly worried. Meanwhile, Kanzaki Hiroki walked into the water holding his daughter. Looking at her innocent face, he couldn't bear to continue, and returned to the shore. He called the coffee shop owner to confess he had almost done something foolish. The owner comforted him, explaining that a temporary escape can help sort out one's thoughts, but too long an escape could lead him further from resolving his issues and cause him to lose himself. This conversation deeply moved Hiroki, and he returned home, handing his daughter to Kanzaki Miwa before heading to work. The next moment, Miwa received a call from the hospital about her mother's grim condition, urging her to come immediately. She left her child with her friend, the only person she could rely on. The friend resented her ex-husband for never taking responsibility for their son and was angered by the thought of Miwa's daughter's biological father being similarly irresponsible. She called Fuyutsuki Ryu to come to the shop. Later, after returning from the hospital, Miwa intended to take her daughter home but saw Ryu entering. The friend insisted they speak face to face. Ryu asked Miwa about the pain he supposedly caused her, as mentioned by the friend. Miwa coldly replied that it was a matter between her and her husband, and unrelated to Ryu, asking him not to come here again. Disappointed, Ryu left, and Miwa went home with her child. When Hiroki came home from work, he faced Miwa with difficulty, demanding to know the biological father of the child. Miwa insisted the daughter was Hiroki's child. Hiroki found her actions too cruel. Miwa explained that Hiroki's initial treatment made her feel suffocated, leading to her affair. She had thought about divorce during her pregnancy but worried about raising the child alone. Hiroki had said he would only provide financially, not care for the child. So she dropped the idea of divorce and had the baby. Now, Hiroki was kind again, and she truly saw him as the father, hoping the three of them could live well together. Hiroki rejected her explanation, thinking she was defending her affair. He removed his wedding ring and demanded custody of the child, asking Miwa to leave the house. Willing to accept the consequences, Miwa packed and left. Now alone, Hiroki struggled to manage work and childcare, eventually hiring a nanny for help. During a business meeting with Ryu, he received a call from the nanny about his daughter's fever and needed to return home immediately. Ryu, seeing Hiroki's urgency and guessing there were issues with Miwa, advised him to go home and suggested they reschedule the work discussion. Ryu took a taxi, but seeing Hiroki unable to get one, offered him a ride. Hiroki appreciated Ryu's consideration, feeling overwhelmed by the solo responsibility for his child. He recalled Miwa attending Ryu's flea market and secretly followed her there, only to see her smiling radiantly, a smile he had never seen before. Hearing this, Fuyutsuki Ryu felt conflicted. He wished Kanzaki Hiroki were a bad person so he could justify rescuing Kanzaki Miwa. However, after several interactions, he realized Hiroki was a good man, which made him feel guilty about his past involvement. As the car approached Hiroki's house, Ryu saw Miwa looking upset. He wanted to ask Hiroki if they had argued but remembered Miwa warning him that it was a matter between her and her husband, not his concern. Ultimately, he didn't ask. With nowhere else to go, Miwa visited her mother in the hospital, who was close to death. Her mother's only wish was for Miwa's happiness. Miwa confessed her mistakes to her mother, who held her and cried, regretting not being more attentive and letting her daughter face so much alone, leading her astray. Hiroki learned from Miwa's friend that her mother was in poor health and took the initiative to bring their child to the hospital. Miwa's mother was deeply moved to see her granddaughter before passing away, and Miwa was grateful. Hiroki suggested Miwa stay at her mother's house to be closer to the hospital and to return home quickly if needed. A few days later, after Miwa's mother passed away, Hiroki helped with the funeral arrangements. Meanwhile, the female colleague who liked Ryu confirmed that he did not reciprocate her feelings and decided to let go. She confessed to Ryu that she had jealously misinformed the media that Ryu was dead, hoping to discourage those who cared for him. Ryu was speechless, wanting to clarify his relationship with Miwa. He asked the friend to deliver a letter to Miwa. In the letter, Ryu recalled their shared past and declared he would now keep those memories deep within his heart, wishing Miwa happiness. After the funeral, Miwa could no longer stay at her mother's house and told Hiroki she would soon move out. However, Hiroki asked her to stay and offered to leave the house himself. In Hiroki's eyes, seeing Miwa holding their daughter was his happiest moment, so he was willing to leave the home to them. Miwa was torn, knowing she had no right to ask for Hiroki's forgiveness, and Hiroki was unlikely to give her another chance. As they prepared to divorce, Hiroki tried to avoid meeting Miwa despite living together. He struggled internally, in pain, wanting to let go of the past and forgive Miwa. But he found it impossible. He went to the coffee shop owner for advice, troubled by Miwa defending her affair. He wanted to live with his daughter, but did not want to separate her from Miwa. However, he could not forgive Miwa, leaving him stuck and conflicted. The owner suggested Hiroki talk to Miwa to ensure he had visitation rights after the divorce, seeing that Hiroki couldn't bear the thought of never seeing his daughter again. Meanwhile, Miwa also confided in her friend that her past decisions were made for her daughter, but now she needed to consider Hiroki's feelings. She was willing to agree to any terms Hiroki proposed, even if it meant Hiroki raising their daughter. After returning home, Kanzaki Miwa recalled her moments with Kanzaki Hiroki and felt she had no right to ask for his forgiveness. She removed her wedding ring. Hiroki came home drunk, repeatedly calling out Miwa's name. Miwa came to take care of him, and he grabbed her hand but quickly let go upon sobering up and rushed into the bedroom. Seeing the wedding ring on the table, he realized Miwa had made her decision. Later, Hiroki finally learned about his wife's affair partner. A female colleague, during work, accidentally discovered that the person Fuyutsuki Ryu cared about was Hiroki's wife. Wanting to see Miwa, she called Hiroki under the pretense of wanting to interview merchants from last year's flea market and asked him to pass the message to Miwa. Hiroki texted Miwa, who then realized Hiroki had known about her participation in the flea market. She explained it was a friend's invitation. Hiroki grew suspicious, as aside from her close friend, he had never heard about any other friends. He remembered the bookmark in the parenting manual and Miwa's strange demeanor when she left the library a year ago. Suspecting something was amiss, he went to the library to find out who organized the flea market. The staff told him it was Fuyutsuki Ryu and mentioned the relationship between Miwa and Ryu. Just then, Ryu was at the library. The two men locked eyes. Unaware of this, Miwa was facing criticism from the female colleague who accused her of having an affair with Ryu and causing harm to those around her. Meanwhile, the conversation between the two men reached its climax. Hiroki, trying to maintain his dignity, demanded to know if Ryu was Miwa's affair partner. The female colleague scolded Miwa for her marital infidelity, hurting Ryu. Miwa retorted, accusing her of projecting her unrequited love for Ryu onto her. The colleague angrily threw water on Miwa. At the same time, the two men confronted each other. Hiroki furiously grabbed Ryu's collar, asking how he planned to handle the situation with their daughter, Kan. Confused, Ryu asked who Kan was. He didn't even know the daughter's name. Hiroki realized Ryu was unaware that Kan was his daughter and stopped the argument, telling Ryu to leave immediately. Ryu, feeling something was amiss, remembered the friend previously wanting him to hold Miwa's child. Miwa had panicked, leading Ryu to suspect the child might be his. Desperate for the truth, he urgently sought the friend for confirmation. The friend, regretting her interference in Hiroki and Miwa's relationship, withheld any information and urged Ryu, if he truly cared for Miwa, not to meddle in her family matters. Every day, Kanzaki Miwa saw Kanzaki Hiroki living in pain. To help Hiroki move on from his suffering, she initiated discussions about divorce, stating she could not be separated from their daughter, but assuring Hiroki that he could visit her anytime. To ensure she could take care of her daughter, Miwa quit her part-time job at her friend's place and started looking for a full-time job. Hiroki, in his anger, impulsively rejected a financing deal from Fuyutsuki Ryu's company. Upon hearing this, the female colleague who had been involved apologized to Ryu, thinking it might be related to her actions towards Miwa. Ryu was furious, loudly demanding that she not interfere in his matters again, and decided to shut down his company and cut off all contact related to Miwa. That evening, Ryu went to Hiroki to sincerely apologize, admitting his mistakes. He had thought he could save Miwa, but after returning from abroad, Miwa had made it clear she wanted to live a good life with Hiroki and their daughter. Ryu realized that Hiroki, not he, was the one who could truly save Miwa. This conversation moved Hiroki. The next day, Hiroki took Miwa to the beach and confessed that on the day he left home with their daughter, he had contemplated suicide, but ultimately could not go through with it. Now, he just wanted to hear Miwa's explanation. Miwa confessed that when she found out she was pregnant, she had seen the news of Ryu's death. After giving birth, she learned Ryu was still alive. But by then, she only wanted to be with Hiroki and their child. When Ryu returned, she didn't want to cause him trouble or risk Hiroki's love for their daughter changing, so she hid everything. Finally receiving Miwa's honest explanation, Hiroki chose to divorce and move out. A few days later, Miwa received a call from a lawyer conveying Hiroki's wishes for her to bring their daughter for one last meeting, as Hiroki intended never to see his daughter again after the divorce. Meanwhile, Ryu received an email that Hiroki had approved the financing for his company. Hiroki then called Ryu, requesting a meeting. Miwa, bringing her daughter to the appointed place, didn't see Hiroki but encountered Ryu, who Hiroki had also invited. Hiroki, having facilitated their meeting, tearfully deleted photos of Miwa and their daughter from his phone. Miwa and Ryu realized that the meeting was arranged by Hiroki. Miwa received a call from Hiroki, who hoped she would tell Ryu about their daughter's paternity, as keeping it from him was too cruel. Hiroki suggested that Miwa had overlooked another option. She and Ryu could co-parent their daughter, allowing her to live with her biological parents. Miwa acknowledged Hiroki's consideration for her and their daughter. After hanging up, she asked Ryu to join her and their daughter for a day at the zoo. While Miwa prepared formula for their daughter, Ryu watched over her, adoringly looking at his daughter. Miwa felt guilty for denying them the chance to recognize each other as father and daughter, but didn't want to make things worse. As their day ended and they were about to part ways, Ryu asked to hold his daughter. Holding her in his arms, he couldn't help but cry. Watching Fuyutsuki Ryu walk away, Kanzaki Miwa couldn't bear it. She called out to him, promising to ensure their daughter's happiness. Ryu, understanding the truth and Miwa's final decision, went to the coffee shop to tell Kanzaki Hiroki that Miwa denied he was the father, but he was grateful to have met his daughter. Hiroki was shocked, but he brought the divorce papers as agreed. He and Miwa signed and stamped them, with Miwa suggesting she would submit them after the new year. Soon after, Ryu's application to start a school in Africa was approved, fulfilling a long-held dream. He asked his female colleague to join him, believing they could achieve great things together. She promised to consider it and get back to him. Before leaving, Ryu met Hiroki again, expressing regret over his limited role in his daughter's life and acknowledging Hiroki's contributions. He admitted that to him, Hiroki was the true father. Ryu planned to go to Africa to bring smiles to more children and hoped Hiroki could find clarity in his own feelings. After the new year, Miwa asked her friend to look after her daughter while she went to submit the divorce papers. While packing, Hiroki found a handkerchief Miwa had given him, suddenly fearing losing her. He immediately called Miwa, asking her not to submit the papers yet as he had something important to say. He rushed to her, confessing his past mistakes towards her and acknowledging her faults as well. He proposed that since they were even, they should live together as a family and watch their daughter grow up. Miwa cried and expressed her desire for them to be together as a family. After their heartfelt confessions, the couple cried and embraced. Together, they went to the friend's shop to pick up their daughter. Seeing them reconcile, the friend was relieved, glad that after everything, the two people who still cared for each other hadn't missed their chance. Miwa embroidered a bookmark for Hiroki, featuring 3 birds representing their family, symbolizing their love and the inseparable bond that would now joyfully bind their family together.